just a bit of background and history around the relationship between PwC and ThoughtWorks. Most people are probably thinking, what is a conservative accounting firm doing at a ThoughtWorks live event? PwC and ThoughtWorks have been mutual clients for many years. We provide tax and accounting services, and ThoughtWorks provide technology software services. As PwC has grown, developed, and built out the consulting practice, we've established a particular focus around digital technologies and the whole digital change that is being caused by the disruption that we're seeing in the market. So Keith and I started talking about how can we actually work together more strategically and go to market together rather than just be mutual clients to each other. And we formed a strategic alliance nearly a year ago, late last year, to try to bring together the whole innovation agenda so we can start from the depth of industry expertise that PwC brings with the depth of technology delivery and agile delivery that ThoughtWorks brings. And the two together, we feel, was a more powerful proposition in the marketplace than either of us going to market independently. So we've formed the relationship, we've got some clients that we're working together on, and we're going to talk a little bit about our point of view on innovation, disruption, and how that innovation framework can come together to deliver value. So we've heard a lot today about rapid change. And the graph we saw this morning, which showed 98% of operating profit going to Samsung and Apple in a market where they didn't exist 5 years ago, I just think is amazing. And that is a great example of how quickly the world is changing. We live in a world that is rapidly changing, and it's not good enough to use traditional methods to deal with issues. So rapid change is causing people to think differently. It's causing people to actually drive different techniques to deliver solutions to problems. We heard about waterfall versus continuous delivery. Waterfall does not deliver the problem in enough time to actually solve the problem. So we actually need to look at different ways of embracing innovation, embracing startup communities, embracing frameworks that deliver solutions in a more rapid way. Just go to the next slide. This is what we deem the burn down curve. The curve at the bottom, and I'm a bit of a walker, so I'm a bit constrained being in this corner here. The curve at the bottom is the burn down curve, and that is what's really happening to revenue and margin in today's business. So when we look at disruption, we look at it from the business angle. What is actually happening to the industry and the organisation within that, and how do they continue to stay relevant? So if that's what's actually happening, the dotted line in the middle is the falsely assumed future revenue. So everyone wants to stay at least static, and flat is the new black, so most people are aiming for flat growth in today's market. Ideally, they want to see a little bit of growth, but all the activity that they're undertaking internally is really just trying to stem the burn down. They're trying to fight off competition, they're trying to ensure that the margin is maintained, they're under price pressure, and we're seeing a lot of it in retail at the moment, which is a lot of my background and history. They're just doing all of this activity to stay still. They're not innovating. They're not thinking differently. They're applying new technology to old business models. They're not reinventing themselves and determining how do they actually take advantage of not only the technologies out there, but the new way of thinking, the new way of doing things. So we live in a world, if I could stay on the retail example, where property was the barrier to entry. If you don't have your retail stores in the right place, then you're not going to enter this market. We now live in a world where there is borderless commerce, and you are now a global retailer in Australia. How do you actually deal with that shift? When David Jones used to look at Myer as their competitor, now they're looking at Nordstrom's, they're looking at JCPenney, they're looking at Selfridges. How do they compete on a global scale? They need to do things differently. They need to think about not only how do you actually get the best out of the assets you've got and maintain margin and revenue, but how do you actually innovate and think about the future products, the future services? What's the business model that we actually need to put in place today to deliver that customer engagement that is expected? We saw earlier today the whole continuum between business ideas and customer needs. We don't live in a product push economy anymore. We live in a customer pull economy. And the customer is determining what they want. If you don't want to deliver it to them as an organisation, that's fine, they'll go elsewhere. So continual innovation is a key aspect of delivering the future sustainability and survival of the organisation. We've done some research recently, and 90% of activity that is undertaken in many organisations actually happens here, below the line. So 90% of effort is actually spent on staying still. And the 10% that's spent on the innovation piece is actually spent on ideas. And the biggest challenge is actually, how do you actually take those ideas to market? The business models, the structures, the incentives don't actually encourage innovation. Most executive salary packages are based on delivering today's revenue, not tomorrow's innovation. So the change has to happen from the top. The metrics and the KPIs need to be changed from the top. Innovation, new business models, new products and services needs to be embedded in the culture of the organisation and the way it's measured for its own survival. If it's not, then what you're going to deliver is great ideas, and then everyone's going to go back to their day job. I've seen so many organisations actually say, we've got a head of innovation. It's great. What budget have they got? Oh, they don't have a budget. What are the KPIs? Well, they need to think about the future and what new ideas. Okay, so what's their alignment with all of the heads of all the departments? Oh, there's no alignment. Okay, so your head of product strategy, what's their innovation KPI? Oh, no, that's the innovation guy's job. And I've seen it in retail as well. We need an online channel. That's great. Go build it, but don't talk to my store guy. Don't disturb my current business, because that's what makes me money today. And there has to be that fundamental shift in the way people view innovation and embed innovation to actually define what the future is. And there's plenty of examples, and Keith's going to go through an example with Kodak, but media companies, music industry, they all didn't see the minnow coming out that was going to disrupt them because they were too worried about today's business. Next slide. So technology innovation outpaces business. So what this graph is showing, that for the last 7 odd years, the innovation is actually coming out of technology, not business. So the ideas aren't coming out of business-led innovation, it's come out of technology-led innovation. And the gap between the technology and the business innovation is where the disruption's taking place. That's where the startup communities are focusing. That's where they are targeting the large multinationals and saying, I'm agile, technology's cheap, I can spin up an AWS server, no problem, and I can actually start attacking. That thinking needs to be ingrained in the multinationals. That thinking needs to be part of the culture of the organisation. How do I disrupt myself? How do I actually protect what I've got so when they come after me, I know where they're going to come from and I'm actually getting myself ready for the future? The fact that that technology innovation isn't coming from, I guess, the big end of town, the big corporates, is the real threat to the economy. And part of what ThoughtWorks and PwC are doing is pulling together that innovation framework to say, how do you actually bring startup world to corporate world and actually bring them together? How do you actually take that thinking, that approach? Most of our clients still want to understand what best practice is. By the time you implement best practice, it's too late. What you actually want to know is what's the next wave. And the organisations that are starting to embrace innovation are looking at the next wave of innovation and they want to be the leader in actually putting that into the market. They don't want to be best practice anymore because best practice only lasts about 6 months. So that technology innovation is driving change. Customers want to engage differently. Employees want to be empowered. And the underlying technology has to be agile enough to actually deal with that change. Because if you embark on the 2-year program to deliver a new technology platform, because that's the change and the transformation that you want to drive, I can guarantee you, you'll probably be out of business at the end of that 2 years. When you look at some of the major ERP implementations that cost $100, $200, $300 million, how are you ever going to get a return on that? So thinking differently, thinking about, we heard this morning, systems of engagement. That's where the value is. How do you engage that customer through innovation, through new ways of thinking, to actually drive those new products and services for the organisation itself? How do you reinvent yourself?
You don't have to reinvent yourself, of course. You can go this way. Lots of companies are not responding well to the exponential increase in the rate of business change. So we saw HMV just last year. HMV went down, orders went down. I like the Kodak example because it's so spectacular. 131-year-old icon of American industry, admired, throughout the entire world, and it's not like they could see this coming for 40 years. Kodak invented digital photography, and in 1975, in conjunction with Apple, they brought the first digital camera to the market. So it's not like they didn't know this was happening. They just couldn't let go of their old business model, and down they went. It's kind of redefined what the Kodak moment is. It's the moment you go bankrupt. I also like the Kodak example because it's the one contribution I've made to the English language, which was to invent the verb to be Kodaked, as in you don't want to be Kodaked. So companies, as John just indicated, need to think about 3 levels of innovation. Business model innovation. When Jim Collins wrote Built to Last almost 20 years ago now, the bar he used to make it into the list of Built to Last companies was companies that had outlived their founders. So you were talking about at least 40, 50, 60-year-old companies. Now the average life of a business model is 8 years and rapidly declining. So you need to think about your business model and can you innovate on that. You need to think about your management model. How are you going to motivate and inspire knowledge workers of the 21st century? The Frederick Winslow Taylor scientific management that was written in 1911 and was practiced by Henry Ford and Andrew Carnegie and Andrew Mellon and all those guys. The 19th and 20th century management model. The managers do all the thinking and planning, and the proletariat does what it's told to do. That's dead. That's over. Nobody's going to work in companies like that anymore. They want to work for companies where they feel really engaged. So you need to think about your management model. And then as John just said, you need to think about product and service level innovation. 80% of new products and services that are launched every single year across all industry verticals do not survive till their 3rd birthday. 80%. You need to innovate there. So I know there's a number of chief innovation officers in the room and people who are innovation managers, and I have to share with you, I'm sure you have this feeling, really difficult to come up with a graphic image that shows innovation. You get a lot of light bulbs coming out of people's heads, you get really cheesy freeway exit signs, innovation this way. I finally picked this one because at least it has the spirit of experimentation. And I want to talk about ingredients for innovation on this slide. Experimentation is one of them. We'll come back to that in just a second. We all know why innovation is hard. John talked about that. You were innovative when you were small and just getting started. Then you grew up into a big corporate. Now everybody's incented on optimizing the supply chain, getting rid of waste in your internal processes, efficiency, efficiency, and efficiency. Nobody's incented to stick their neck out and try something new. That's what stifles innovation in big corporations. And it's hard for them to get around it. So in 2010, IBM did a global study of 1,500 CEOs. They do this study every 2 years. And 95% of the CEOs in that study said innovation was absolutely critical to their business. But less than half of those CEOs had any body or process to actually drive innovation in their organization. And I'll bet if you interviewed the less than half that had any body or process, half of them would tell you it doesn't work reliably. Innovation in most corporations is still essentially an accident. Now, there's lots of techniques and processes and things you can do and lots of companies are doing them. FedEx Days, hackathons, Google allocates free time, as did 3M for many years. But those are kind of like arrows, They can be sharp, they can be useful, but if you don't have a quiver to put them in, it's hard to keep track of them. It's hard to have any sense that innovation is actually going to be predictable. So that's what we've been working on together, is to try to come up with a framework for innovation that can give you the chance of repeatable, reliable success. One of the things that I like to talk about that's another ingredient of innovation is multidisciplinary teams. It's useful to think about the fact that the Nobel Prize in Science over almost the entirety of the 20th century did not go to the best scientists in their individual field. It didn't go to the best physicist or the best chemist or the best mathematician. It went to people with multidisciplinary exposure. So a chemist who also knew something about physics, or a mathematician who also knew something about biology. That combination of disciplines gave them the ability, and sometimes it was teams, gave them the ability to have insights that other people just didn't have. And that same thing happens in innovation. So if you look at what IDEO does, they hire poets and architects and developers. And frequently, if you put a developer who knows about a really cool new technology in with a business person who doesn't know about that technology, they might come up with a really breakthrough idea that they wouldn't have got on their own. So a sense of experimentation and exploration, take advantage of multidisciplinary, putting different viewpoints together. And lastly, take advantage of constraint, because constraint drives a lot of innovation. Two of the top innovative companies on everybody's list year after year for the last few years are Google and Facebook, both of which were started by students. Their constraint was they didn't have any money, but they were unconstrained in their thinking. So that kind of constraint can really drive you to new innovation. If you're a global company with a big footprint in the global south, and over half of our employees are now in the global south, you have to think about how frugal innovation in the global south is going to drive a different kind of innovation. Most of the people in rural India don't have electricity. So we found things like the Coolio $70 refrigerator being developed that runs on batteries, not on electricity. We worked on a project last year in India for a company called Simpa Networks. We came up with their business model and built the technology in 12 weeks to put them into the marketplace, where they're delivering, again, in rural India, no electricity, we're delivering solar devices that are prepaid in a local shop. An SMS authorization goes out to activate the solar device, and they've got solar power. 12 weeks, different kind of business model, because constraint in the third world and in developing countries drives a different kind of innovation. So I want to play you a little movie about innovation in the retail space, but first I want to, about Burberry's, but I just want to give you a little background. 150-year-old British luxury icon, everybody knows Burberry's. But in 2006, when Angela Rentz took over as the new CEO, Burberry's was in the toilet. They were in serious trouble. Nobody was buying trench coats. Most of the sales in their stores was on low-margin third-party accessories. They were seriously in trouble. And within 2 years of Rentz taking over, she was hit by two things. One, the worst decline in consumer spending in 65 years, occasioned by the global financial crisis. And two, what she calls the digital tsunami. All of their competitors were going online. So Burberry's responded by that in investing heavily in digital. And then last year, they relaunched their flagship store at 121 Regent Street in the West End of London. And they did something that was really interesting. Most omni-channel retailers there, I've said it, when they're thinking about their tablet strategy or their mobile strategy or their digital strategy, think about how do I recreate an experience that's consistent with the in-store strategy. Burberry's completely flipped that on its head. They said, our website is so fantastic, how do we create an in-store experience that will be like going on our website? So let's just play the video. they spent the bomb on the video too. Fantastic innovation, 500 speakers, 100 interactive screens. You go into that Burberry store, you pick up a trench coat, the mirror in front of you turns into a video about that coat. The quality of the wool that went into it, the quality of the craftsmanship, the legacy of the coat. Awesome. But consider this fact. That was a bet that took tens of millions of pounds to find out if it would work. Because you couldn't test that kind of thing in a usability lab. 30-foot tall screens with John Lennon singing and playing the guitar. You actually had to build it to find out if it would work. And if you get that wrong, you're gone. You're toast, career over. So, and not to mention the fact that you cost your company a lot of money. So, the kind of question, great, but really high risk. So, is there a way we can think about conducting experiments, finding out, making multiple, much smaller bets to actually drive innovation in a new way without having to spend that kind of money? And parenthetically, one other data point before we move on. Across all industries globally, there is absolutely no correlation between the level of R&D expenditure and actual innovation. Think about that. So companies can blow a lot of money and spend millions and millions of dollars on R&D with absolutely no expectation in that certain 20th century way of doing things that it's actually going to result in innovation. So we think there's a less risky way.
So the framework. So if you take the premise that most organisations can actually innovate or can actually generate ideas, they know what's wrong with their business, they know what's happening in the industry, but the constraint is existing structure, existing metrics, KPIs, investment, etc. The other constraint is actually dominant logic. If you ask a banker to solve a banking solution, or a banking problem, you'll end up with a banking solution. You ask a traditional medical practitioner to solve a health issue, it will typically be, come to see me in my suite. So the multidisciplinary teams taking advantage of startup communities, taking advantage of people that know nothing about the industry or the problem they're trying to solve, usually gets you the best ideas. So if organisations can come up with ideas and you can supplement that content and supplement that ideation process with external input, you end up with a richer experience. But the more important thing is, how do you then take the idea through a process of incubation and commercialisation without taking the big risk that Burberry did? How do you actually start with externally and internally sourced content, put it through a filter, be comfortable to actually fail something rather than feel committed that the brand damage of failure is too great. Being comfortable that you can actually take it through a process that is structured, a process that doesn't require a business case with a 3-year ROI to actually bring it to market. So the framework is structured around taking small bets, using internal and external knowledge from other industries, knowledge from different communities to come up with what that future might look like.
Yeah, PwC's got a lot of business and financial metrics that they can use to help filter that. I got a simple one, which is I tell my clients, if it's going to cost $8 billion or require rewriting the laws of physics, maybe we'll park that one for a while. But if it's an idea you'd like to tease out some more, even if it's kind of out of the box or it's not something you would normally do in your industry, go ahead and feed it into this iterative cycle. We've talked earlier in the day, people talked about the continuous design, continuous delivery, iterative process. And what we talk about is the fuel that we pour in to make that cycle spin around faster and faster is two different kinds of thinking. Design thinking from human-centered design. Put the client or the customer at the center of your viewpoint and don't design anything that customer wouldn't find useful, usable, and desirable, which doesn't mean it's a need that they can articulate. I mean, nobody won't ask for an iPod or an iPad or an iPhone. So you can design things that you think will be really greatly accepted that nevertheless customers couldn't necessarily articulate. But design for the customer. Systems thinking. Again, keep the customer at the center of your viewpoint and look at your value chain back up from that. Like, how do you deliver, actually, what are the processes you go by, or with your external supply chain, to deliver products and services to that customer? And anything in that value chain that the customer doesn't value and isn't going to pay you money for, from his point of view or her point of view, is waste. Get rid of it, because it's not doing you any good. So use those two kinds of thinking. Out pop multiple minimum viable products, and we're talking generally in a matter of days or weeks, not months and months and months. Everybody's read. How many people? Anybody not read Eric Ries's book on the Lean Startup? Okay, one person. We'll get you a copy of that. You know, the idea, and you know, he got this from Agile, right? He was an Agile developer, and he just kind of rolled it up and said, I think this will work. That instead of trying to build the all singing, all bells and whistles thing and spending, you know, sometimes millions and millions of dollars doing it, figure out the smallest thing you could possibly do that your customer would pay you money for and that you could learn from. Get it out there quickly and start that learning process.
And given that you're trying to innovate, you're actually trying to meet unmet needs of the customers. Customers actually don't know that they need it. The customers don't really understand what they want until they see it. So going through the continuous design, continuous delivery process to actually put something in front of them to get that feedback is the critical element of that. We went through, PwC is going through, I guess, a new strategy alignment piece. We understand that our business model is under threat. We're looking at different ways of delivering our services to market. We've defined a new set of values, and one of the things that we've just done recently, we've defined our new values, and we used sort of online idea jams to actually generate those. So we had a 48-hour jam to get those ideas, to get the feedback from 5,000 people in Australia, and try to settle on those. But what we're doing now is actually saying, how do we actually measure that? So we're in the process of developing an app to capture people demonstrating the values. But rather than sitting in the back office trying to define what the requirements are and build it, we set up a stall or a booth in our foyer. One in Melbourne, one in Sydney, one in Brisbane. And as people came to work, as people went for a coffee, as people had their lunch, we actually stopped them and asked them, what is it that you'd want to see? What do you think about this idea? We had the developers there, and the developers were actually building out the idea. They were designing the output, and it was an iterative process over a week where we actually developed it in conjunction with the user, and they didn't even know it. So testing it with the customer, using the analytics that comes out of the products themselves. If you are actually going to deploy a product and get people to use it, look at how they're using it, and using that analytics to feed it back through, refine it, and then reissue it and repivot. Because wherever you start, you can pretty much guarantee you'll end up in a different place. And we saw some examples earlier about, you know, the beautiful earned value graphs and when you're actually trying to define scope, and in an agile way, it will end up somewhere different to where you started. But if you don't engage the customer and listen to what they say, look at the data, you will probably deliver something that no one actually wants.
Yeah, and I just want to sort of come to near the close here by saying this is not a theoretical construct. We've been working in this way with our clients for 2 or 3 years. We wrote the book on continuous design that came out about a year ago. The continuous delivery book by Jez Humble won the Jolt Award last year in the United States as the most influential book in IT. And now lots of people have heads of continuous delivery in their organizations. So this has been tried and tested in the marketplace to produce better results. We've been doing this in retail, in telecommunications, in financial services, in health and education, biotechnology. This actually works. So, we're not trying to say it's rocket science, but if you're looking for a way to start making these smaller bet experiments, start actually building, when I talk about minimum viable products, I'm talking about software, that you can actually put out in front of people and start getting their feedback from, not paper mache models or something. This does work. So everybody needs to innovate. Sometimes you need help. Talk to us. Thank you.
And just the final point, we heard today from MI9 around the 10-fold reduction in cost in adopting new ways of working on new technology. We did some work with Transport. Transport's a joint client of ours. they had a dilemma in getting information into the hands of the consumer. And the dilemma they had was a 16-month program to deliver a pilot that was going to cost them millions. What they ended up doing is using innovation and a different way of delivery to deliver it in 6 weeks for under $100,000. So it is possible. There are many different types of organisations that are embracing it. And if an organisation like transport can embrace it and actually get results and get value, then anyone can do it.